Alright folks, welcome to this exciting video where you once again join me in the wild landscape of Scotland. And for this intro we're actually joined by this tame little pheasant here out on the hill. This is a cool adventure folks, because as you may have seen from the last video, I was at the top of like Glen Doll and we found a crazy abandoned cottage. So for today's adventure I've actually come back to the same location and I'm wanting to head further up that back track. It's such a crazy mission to get to that road at the other side of the river, but because this land here is grazed by so many sheep and cows, and because there's so many pheasants in this area, there's no actually a problem with ticks like you get in some other areas where it's wild and there's no sheep. So in true exploring spirit, I just thought, like, if there was one little abandoned house or croft up that road, there may be more. And then when I started to think about it, I thought, how cool would it be to go on another adventure and try and find just some more abandoned history. That's basically what we're on with this adventure. I'm on the hunt for some abandoned history hidden in the wild lands of Glen Doll, I should say, folks. Yeah, because Glen Doll is a wee glen situated at the top of Glen Clova in Scotland here. And some of these little houses and things that I visit, they're built on sites which would have been there from like the early days, 1600s, the early agriculture on this land here. But because I recorded quite a lot of the adventure on the way in the last time, I'll no bore you with that. I'll probably just update you like once I get to the far side of the forest, or not unless something exciting happens, folks. This is mad because there's actual evidence the cows and stuff roam about in this forest here. Check it out. So I'm just staying vigilant that there's no livestock, and always come with the greatest of respects to like the landowner, and even the buildings that I explore. We take nothing but photographs and footage, folks, and we save the history for future generations. Yeah, it's a lot drier today. Yesterday when I was up here it was after tea and it was an evening adventure and it was proper wet. Yesterday was a proper wet day, whereas today we're blessed with some decent weather. And yeah, I just thought, why not come back to this crazy land, folks? If there's more abandoned history to be found, I just love to find it. So I can see since the last time I crossed this rickety old bridge here in the glen, the river's actually lowered. It's probably about half a foot lower, and it's not even 24 hours later, and that just shows how fast things can change. Like, the rivers can rise and fall so quick by such a high height. Yeah, I need to try and make my way into this forest now, folks. This mission is amazing because I love exploring landscapes like this. To find history at the end of it, it makes it so special. Sometimes with these adventures I could walk miles and not even find any new history, but that's also sometimes what it's about. And still, it's cool. Often the adventure on the way to these properties, you just see so many different things that you never would have known. Wow, here comes the rain. The rain has literally just come on this second, folks. Sometimes if you want a real adventure, folks, you just literally have to go out into the wilds of Scotland. This time of year there's some mad little mushrooms. Check that thing out right there. Look at the colour of that, eh? It's crazy that that can occur in nature. Such a vibrant red colour. Check it out, folks, there's little tiny ones here which are just growing. This one here has been mauled by some sort of beast. I think a lot of animals run about in forests and places like this. Anyway, let's head on with it. It's good news because so far on this adventure I've not seen any ticks. And that's often the biggest fear in a landscape like this. But I think because it's so well grazed, there's nothing really to worry about. Because I've seen evidence here of like hoof prints. So sheep and cows must roam, even in these wild lands here. Anyway, on with this adventure, folks. Let's get to the action. Check it out folks, I'm not sure if it comes out on the camera, but there's birds of prey just circling above my head right here. You can hear them making their call. Oh, there's 3 of them. There's 1 here, and then I can see 2 up here. And they're making the typical call that the bird of prey makes. I've now made it out of that forest onto this back track, and I've only ever walked up here as far as that little cottage, which featured in the last video. So I'm quite excited to go further up this track and just see what's there. That's what these adventures are all about, folks. I love exploring things that I've never seen and going places that I've never been. And it was so random finding that little Croft farmhouse in the last video, so I thought it would be so cool to push on further and see if there's any more evidence of history in this wee glen, because it's such a wild little track. I just love coming like on adventures in places like this. Whoa, a massive dragonfly right here folks. It won't even come out on the camera. That thing's literally like 4-inch long. I freaked out. I hate, see when those dragonflies and things are flying right up to you, they're so big. My natural reaction is just to freak out. See dragonflies and things like that in Scotland. Around here you get some of the biggest things that I've ever seen. And like literally, when I saw one day, I looked it up online, like biggest UK dragonflies, and literally none of them on the videos are as big as what you can see when you're around here. Obviously this camera's not going to pick up a little dragonfly like fleeing about, 'cause it's obviously so small and quick like, but I obviously do my best to record what I see. And these wet lands is just ideal for dragonflies, because they lay their eggs in the top layers of the wet, like moist earth. Anyway, on with this adventure. I've seen so much already, all these birds of prey, which I think are buzzards, and then that mad dragonfly folks, and all those creatures are proper hunters. Like, the dragonflies are hunters just as much as the buzzards. So there we go. If you want to see that wee house folks, you can go back to the last episode on the channel when I first discovered that incredible bit of history. There's a lot more sheep here in the front garden today. But yeah, today's adventure is all about finding new history that we've never seen before. And that's why I'm pushing on further up this track. I think there's a good couple of miles of track. And I'm just thinking there could potentially be some other wee settlements and ruins that tells a story of the history here in the glen. And I just love to see it, I love to find it. And it's just breathtaking when you look at these massive hills. The size of this landscape, they look like small hills a lot of the time, but once you get up close you realise they're absolutely massive. Some of these cliff faces, they're just solid rock. Proper Scottish mountains up here. So an interesting detail to add to the history of this old property at the side of the track. You can see the little original dry stone dike line leading right along here and right around. And you have to imagine at the time of that croft, these trees wouldn't have been here. This area must have been cleared as like a bit of a field related to that property. And that's interesting to see because it's a big boundary line. So I've just noticed there's an old dike line coming down through these ferns here folks, and it's like there's another little bit walled off here, so I'm not sure if there's another settlement or whatever. I can see the dike line leading on down into the trees. Sometimes the vegetation in the forest is so thick, if there's any history it's often harder to notice, especially at this time of year when everything's so overgrown. Wow, I'm just blown away by the majestic scenes here that I'm witnessing folks. Look at the way the light shines over these massive mountainous ridges. It just blows my mind, and I'm always keeping half an eye open here for a big rock or whatever tumbling down the hill, because that's how a lot of these massive stones have ended up down here. Check it out folks, look at the size of this big nugget that must have rolled down the hill. You can just imagine that when it's come hurtling down and crash landed on top of this other massive stone. And that's what we see all over Glen Clova. and Glen Doll here. It's just mad. Wow, I'm just blown away by the landscape. I probably say it so many times on the video, folks. This area here has got some massive chunks of rock just lying, and you can just imagine some of these cliff faces up here must have been crumbling. These big rocks just come rumbling down the hill. But every year these landscapes change because of like rock falls and landslides, because I can see at the other side of the glen on one of the hills there's been a fresh rock fall, which I couldn't even remember seeing yesterday, but today it's totally obvious on the hill where it slid down. So I just imagine the horse and carts and different old people like back in the day coming along here when those farms and wee houses were in their prime along the glen. This must have been the main route they came in, and it's just some wild little track. It was probably easier on horse and carts coming around here than what it is in modern vehicles. Some of these twists and turns. I think I've seen the gamekeeper up here, or the shepherd. They've got like those little four-wheelers. It's like a quad with a roof on it, and that's quite popular nowadays with the gamekeepers and things around these lands. At one time years ago, I think the gamies used to use the horse as well. This is amazing, folks. This is lands that we've never seen before on the channel. These views looking over, we're able to see further up this other glen here now. And I'm thinking this road must loop right back around to the main road, so I might even do a circuit. We'll see what we find up here. It's crazy sometimes with these like spontaneous walks into the wilderness just to find history. You never know what's around the corner. It's just as much of a surprise to me as it is to the viewers. And it's just amazing the things we've found like over the years just by exploring places like this, landscapes like this. And from this side you get a crazy view over to the other mad cliffs. The height of these hills is just vast and incredible, folks. So it's absolutely mad to see the journey that waterfall's come from the top of that cliff. It drops down and it leads all the way down to this. Every time I go around the corner, I'm waiting to like put the camera off and I just see something else that's proper cool. It's like interesting little bits of landscape. Some of these boulders, like you can't exaggerate the size of them. You can just imagine that when it came bouncing and rolling down the hill. There must have been other fragments coming flying off it, like bullets. I'm just going to keep heading round this road, folks. It's just amazing to explore lands that you've never been on before. And it's a cool feeling when you never know what's round the corner. That's the same feeling the first explorers of these lands must have had back in the day. Check out, folks, the road here splits into two, and I would quite like to explore both directions. Oh, it's okay, this road doesn't go actually that far. Oh, what have we found here, folks? Here's remains of an ancient settlement. This is what we were hoping for. The rain's now actually on, but judging from what I'm seeing, it shouldn't actually stay on for very long. Yeah, see this area here, folks? There's actually been a little settlement here. And we'll take a look at these remains in a second. First of all, we'll go and take a look up here, because it looks like there's a proper wall, or a proper walled off area. See, that's what makes these adventures worthwhile, folks. We're seeing little bits of history that we had never seen before, never documented on YouTube. And it's mad to have this like every week. Fresh places, fresh adventures. Yeah, let's check this out. What has it been? The brickwork is actually constructed really well. This dry stone construction. I'll go and dry the lens, folks, because it looks like there's some water droplets on it. So I'm seeing that this whole piece of land here has been landscaped at an ancient time. Both sides of this section has got an old wall line, and it looks like there's been an original track coming down this far side. And just check out this brickwork. Sometimes you go to different areas in Scotland and the dry stone dike technique is completely different, but it's just as strong. It's like each diker must have had a slightly different way of doing it. No way, look at that grasshopper. Check him out. Whoa, he's pinging away. He's green. Some of them's brown. He's right in the centre of the frame right there, folks. Little grasshopper. Whoa. We see a lot of grasshoppers on our adventures, like, they're cool. They're always just fleeing about out in the grass here. No way. Check this out, folks. Unseen, undocumented. Incredible little bit of Scottish history here. Just imagine a wee farming community, like, earning their living way up here in these hills. Back then, there might have been a lot more forest and dense lands on these hills. Dense vegetation. And a lot of the time, these early farmers came up here and, like, cleared a bit of land. And just check out the stonework. I love to see it, folks. I'm always hyped when I find something new. And you can just imagine the folk which would have, like, earned their living from a place like this. Maybe sorting out sheep, sorting out cattle. Some of these crofts would have just had a few of each animal to keep themselves going. Just check out the stonework here. The way that the big stones is built with the little stones in between. And just think about the person who laid this stone. Think how many years it stood here strong. And it's amazing because they used the rough stone that was available to them on the hill. And that's what you see at a lot of places. It's incredible it can be so strong considering the different shape of each little stone they used. See, this is interesting because there's actually a drain kind of bit underneath the wall there. And I believe that was put on there on purpose because I'm seeing another one here underneath. And I think this bit I'm standing in just now was actually built on at a later time. Maybe they had constructed this main wall and this was added to. No way, this is so cool, folks. Yeah, this has been a separate little corner shed here. You just imagine it when the walls were at full height. Often some of these places may have had like a wooden roof on certain sections, and as the years obviously progress, that all rots away. Hundreds and hundreds of years, it's just the stone that's left. And credit to it, the strength of the stone construction, it still stands to this day. Look at the size of some of these foundation stones on this wall. Absolutely massive. Yeah, I think this area here is likely where they sorted out the animals and the sheep. And down there must have been a wee house or whatever that we'll go and take a look at in a minute. Yeah, this is so cool. The stonework on this is really well protected, I think, from the trees. But it looks different to some of the dry stone construction that I've seen in this area. Wow, yeah, there's an old track. Maybe even just a gamekeeper's track leading on down there. And see, from this angle, folks, you can actually see how they've had the outer wall of their settlement leading down. And then right around the front to that area that we saw, kind of leading round the side. But it's like they've built up the whole front edge with massive boulders along there. Look at the size of some of these boulders, folks, that they've used here to hold their boundary, I believe, up the hill. It's just amazing to see. All these massive stones are all in a line, so they've obviously been put here to mark the outer perimeter. Yeah, I love to see the wee details often, the way they constructed things back in the day. And I think this section here would never have had a roof on it, because I can actually see down here the way they've built it so the water could drain out below. Check it out here, folks, look at that. That's definitely been put in on purpose there to drain the field away down this kind of bit, and you can see how they've made it. There's been an area dug like a channel to drain the site, and that's because of the wet conditions on the hill here. It shows it was likely to have been wet back in those days as well. Yeah, that track just kind of leads on down into the forest. I might just take a walk down to the corner and see if there's any other wee remains of walls and things. It's a shame to see the way this has fallen down recently, but that's how it's cool to record these places and document them while they're still standing to a certain degree. Keep the history in these glens alive. It's another little Glen Doll settlement. So like the wee croft that we saw in the last video with the wee house at it, they were probably built at about the same time, this one and that one. But the difference is this one hadn't been kept and maintained for as long. And that's why there's no evidence of like the wee house or whatever. Most likely destroyed years ago. Sometimes places like this were thriving little communities before the days of like the Highland clearances and things like that. But it's just mad to think about the boy out feeding his cows, rounding up his sheep or sorting them out. And then you'd maybe hear the shout from the house to say the tea's ready. The tatties are boiled and the stovies is made, folks. And that's what I love to imagine when I'm walking about these places. We'll go and take a look and see if we can find remains of what must have been a wee croft house up here. An interesting thing, this must have been the boundary wall here, but you can just see it's like a grassy ridge now, and that shows how many hundreds of years ago it was a place like this was thriving. It's just so interesting. A lot of the time they were getting the fresh water down off the hill, and then you can just think that would have been carrying their sewage and stuff away as well. And a lot of these places were just like self-sufficient little like settlements basically, or family farms. And it's often sad to think what's become of them. And there's less of a community spirit nowadays as to how there used to be in the glens and even in the lands themselves. A lot of the time the glens had a lot more of a population back in the early days. Just look at this. There's been quite a substantial building down here. That's why I think this must have been potentially like the farmhouse or the main dwelling. Look at it here. See, this wall's been built even better than the one we just saw up there at the sheep pen. Check it out. Look at that. See, that's a proper house wall right there, folks. And this must all be related to this site. It's crazy on my videos because we visit so many locations, they're all in different conditions. Like, you never know. This is like as bad as some of the houses can get. Like, but at least we can still see a trace of it and remember the history. Some of the other houses we go to, they're pretty much, it's as if somebody's just walked out the door that week. And it's crazy having that variation and all the different years of the history from these places. It's just mind-blowing. So I think at this end of the building here, this has been a window. And then look at it here, it's like at the back, the stones is actually shaped here. You can still see where they're built. So this has been some kind of little back pathy. So I'm not sure if this was like the way they came around to the house from the farm. Another interesting thing, you can see this whole area has been diked off as well with a dry stone dike. And that area is a wee bit higher than this. It's like this whole area has been landscaped. Yeah, and the house there is just so special to see. I'm guessing the front door must have been here, or maybe even potentially at that side. Yeah, it's interesting to see how they built things back at this time as well. Obviously, the culture of the land and the people's changed so much since this time. And it's like this wall here is built separate from the main house. Yeah, this is basically what a Scottish croft was though in ancient time. And I can see more of those massive boulders leading round what must have been the perimeter of the property. And in this internal section you can see another one of these thick dry stone dikes. So they most likely had sheep and stuff down here as well. A couple of fields, like maybe this was where they would be grazing, and then up there would be where they would be sorting them out. Maybe these other little enclosures would have been for like the chickens, or sometimes they would maybe have a couple of pigs or whatever in a certain section. That's maybe even what the little square section of wall was for at the top. Oh, there's so many flies and beasts just like flying into my face. Anyway, we'll head over this side. Before we leave this site, I'm going to head over here because I think there's another, like more remains of a different building over here. So I think this must have been one of the main entrances into this compound here, because it looks like it's always been an entrance. Right the way along the bottom you can see the original wall line. And it's crazy to think, like, I always imagine how the people that lived here must have been friends with like the folk in the wee house from like the last video. Yeah, it's just mad to think what might have gone on in these glens. You can imagine them coming along here like at New Year or whatever with a bottle of whiskey, maybe a bottle of rum. You imagine the celebrations and all the things that must have gone on over the years in places like this. Maybe times that they were in fear when they knew that they were away to get kicked out of their house. It's just incredible, the years that pass and the amazing things that happen in one site. It must have been such a hustling, bustling place, and then one day it's just gone. Like the click of a finger, the history is just forgotten. Nature takes back over. Videos like this are one of the few things that keeps the history alive for places like this. But this is a random site because there's so much evidence of like old wall lines and things. It's cool to see how they used those massive boulders as a boundary. Yeah, when I first came into the site, it must have been this wall I was seeing. And for sure, this has been the proper little hub here of the farm community. Another thing, that wall up there is maybe better kept just because it's sheltered from the trees for sure. Because you can see this one down here, how the grass is pretty much taken over. So check this out, folks. Within this dense area here of thistles and crazy nature, there's actually remains of another building. There's been a secondary little square building here. And I just thought it's cool to record it, so it's like documented. It shows all the different little buildings and things that must have been going on at a farm like this. Maybe they used to have their straw or wheat, which they may be growing out here. They wouldn't have had much for sure, but you can just imagine they would store it in some of these little sheds or whatever. Maybe some farm equipment and stuff was stored. The original Hill Road may have not come this route, and I always just try and imagine the sites, without imagining how it looks nowadays. Anyway, look at this, there's a wee track, takes you down to a beach kind of area, and I'm wanting to have a wee look down before we continue around this track. I'm wanting to take a look down here because it looks like a pure paradise scene, folks. And this is what I always promise you on the channel, the coolest of adventures. I'm always amazed that I end up in the middle of these places, but it's so cool often just going full send into nature, and then before you know it, you're just looking at amazing things. Shout out to my viewers as well, all across the world. It's amazing to see the wee corners of the world that people comment from. And often I just imagine how it is in the areas that you folks live in. A lot of folk live out in wild, remote landscapes as well, but it can be so different from these places. Equally as wild, but the landscape itself is just so different. Look at this, this little track just comes down onto this. It's like a pebble beach, a big floodplain. And then we can see the river over here. Wow, this is so cool, folks. I'm actually in the river right now. It's quite shallow at this point here. But wow, it just gets super deep right there. It would probably breach the wellies if I tried to go too far. That's perfect for actually cleaning the dirt off the wellies when I was traipsing through that muddy kind of forest area. Yeah, there'll be fish in here for sure swimming about. Sometimes you see them jumping up out of the water. Louping, as you call it in Scotland. Sometimes the trout is louping for sure. Yeah, this is just some majestic scene, folks. I've travelled so far through this today and it's been cool to see what we've seen so far, but the adventure's not over. I've still got to try and somehow navigate back around the other side of the glen here. So this is now the other perimeter line here of that settlement that we just looked at. And I'm just keeping my eyes peeled for any more history, folks. There could be anything. There might even still be more like little crofts or wee buildings to be discovered. It's so cool I can take the viewers along on this journey with me. We're discovering the real history of Scotland here that's just forgotten and abandoned. this stuff's not in any mainstream papers anywhere. It's just a wee story of a Scottish glen. Look at that, folks, what a beautiful little bridge here. And it's so cool to cross back over this river. And now we're blessed with this incredible sunshine. It's so warm out here, it's unreal. And I'm glad I wore this bucket hat to keep the sunshine off my neck, off my head. Yeah, we're still just walking through paradise. Whoa, these are proper just like moving around as I go over them. That's quite eerie. So I can actually see one of the buildings which is at the far end up here. I think it's a private area, like, but it's actually there's a World War II Nissen hut up here, which is an old like arched hut most commonly used in World War II. So I'm not sure if there was like military training or whatever went on up here in the war, or it might have just literally been that they've reused a Nissen hut after the war, which also happened quite a lot. I think I'd be as well just cutting straight across diagonally here. So this is one of these places, folks, no matter where you look, no matter what angle, we're just literally standing in paradise here, and it's like some mega little grass meadow in the middle of a beautiful wonderland. And it was so special to find that wee croft back there. I was just reflecting on that as I was walking there, and it's interesting just to think of the history. And I think this little farm, which is at the top here, was probably originally built back at the same time as those old crofts as well. But this one's obviously been upkept and maintained and then kept running until the modern times. So I can see that wee Nissen hut there, folks, and I'm thinking, judging from the dry stone construction around this area, it's like that Nissen hut may have been built on the foundation of a wee croft, like what we just saw a minute ago in this episode. But it is interesting to theorise about that. Maybe it's just the fact there is a croft here and then that was built at the edge of it. But it looks like it's been freshly faced at the ends with some new wood. It's interesting to see those wee military buildings, and there is still a few of them left, but they're getting few and far between. So check this out, folks, we've actually made it to the main road here at Glen Doll. And this is almost the point where the main road goes as high up the glen as it can. There's actually a bit you can park at. Check this out though, this farm here, it probably dates from a similar time period to the one we just visited. It's just this one's been upkept and maintained. And it is interesting to see it. Look at this old wall. It's proper starting to lean over. Built at ancient times, folks. And then I think this area at the other side is actually like a scout camp or whatever. I remember that from years ago. We used to come up this glen and play football on the grass. And also there's a quarry around this side. We used to come and play football quite a lot. And I remember back in the day that used to be the scout centre for sure. Wow, we've made it though. We've come a full circuit of this glen almost. Now I just have to make my way back down to my car. You can see how these roads and even the farms were like just positioned in the land between the massive rocks. It must have been such an extreme job laying a road like this. And I just love to see the old stonework and stuff on these sheds. Look at that little opening there. It must have been for them loading or unloading maybe like grain or wheat, the straw and stuff like that back in the day. Maybe the person would come here with a horse and cart and they would throw the stuff out the window. Yeah, this is just some crazy cliff here, folks. We've seen a lot of that in this episode. It's been mad to see the variation of things that we've witnessed. Even around this side, these are some old sheds and stuff. Bray Downey Farm, shout out if you live at Bray Downey Farm. What a beautiful idyllic setting this is. It's just like living in the middle of a postcard. And look at these two sheep here standing up on the rocks. Bah. Check them out, folks. Let's try and get a wee bit closer. Get the footage. Hello! What a happy sheep, check him out. Chilling. Eating his grass. What a tame local sheep, folks. These sheep are crazy because they climb about on all those rocks. These are pretty much cliff dwelling sheep. Their home is on the wildest of lands. They must do well to keep their balance on some of those slippy rocks. So this massive quarry here, folks, this is where we used to come and play football when we were younger. When we first passed our driving tests, we used to come up from the town of Kirriemuir and we would kick the ball as hard as we could and it would always come back off the rocks. So we used to play a game called One Touch, and like, you could only kick it once, and if you didn't hit the wall, like, that was it, you would lose a point, or you would, the other two folk would get a point. I can't mind the exact details, but yeah, it was quite cool. I also remember we used to have those little bird scaring bangers, and we would set them off in the middle of that quarry. And literally, I mind one time the gamey came because he thought that there was somebody shooting. It used to be so loud in the quarry because it would echo the noise like out. Absolute madness, folks. So I can see another angle of that Nissen hut there, and that must have been the area. I've come right along the back of those trees at the far side. What a cool little holiday house that would be, or a weekend getaway. A little World War II Nissen hut hidden in this landscape here, folks. It's just breathtaking. Check it out, folks. Up on this hill here is actually a dangerous cave that we've explored a few times. You can kind of see the entrance in the middle of that boulder field. We have explored this hill in great detail. There's also a really interesting balancing rock up there, which is balancing by a pure miracle on top of another one, and literally there's like a millimetre of rock just holding it from falling down the hill. But that's the thing, these hills are changing all the time with rock falls and avalanches. Yeah, it's just insane today to see this glen from a different angle. I've explored this side of the glen in detail, so it's cool to finally be over there, seeing what lies beyond these lands that we had never seen. I can finally see it up ahead, folks. There's a tree line right in that little gap there, and that's basically the tree line. I started this adventure going along, and I've been right around this whole glen here, and you can see I've already come probably a mile and a half or 2 miles down this, probably a mile and a half I would say, down this Glen Doll road. I've probably still got maybe like a mile to go, maybe a mile and a half, so it's a fair walk. When I was coming down the other side of the glen, it didn't even feel like I was walking as far, but sometimes when you're on an adventure like looking for history, you just keep going, and it's just mad how far you can walk. And it's cool when I see this sunshine. It often just comes along the hill and it lights it up, and depending on the light conditions, these hills have got a different atmosphere, a different character. All it takes is the weather just to change and it looks like a completely different place. Sometimes once the light shines on the hills, you get a real essence of their size and vastness. And now I've come further down here, we're kind of out of the wind. I think it was windy at the top because of the shape of the land, the lie of the land. The wind's coming down both these mega valleys, and it must just be blasting down through that side, because over here it's just peaceful and relaxing. There's not a sound apart from the animals, and I keep seeing these pheasants running through all the grass. Now and again they jump out and give you a fright. Anyway, let's keep this action-packed adventure going, folks. It's just mad the things I've seen today, and it's been so worth it. Look at this, folks. Look at the way these hills here are lit up with the sunshine in the lower glen. But look now, where we were up the glen, it's actually raining really heavy, and we've been so lucky to avoid that on this adventure. That's sometimes the joy of exploring in Scotland. You just have to head out and hope for the best. You often have to be prepared. That's why I'm wearing the thicker coat today. If it had rained, I was prepared, but it's mad just to see how heavy that is. And literally, I'm getting so close to the car now. I'm probably just half a mile, and I can see the tree line which I first came in at the side of. But it's just crazy to see the difference in weather with the clear sunshine on these hills, and then the mega heavy rainstorm. And I'm just about getting run over here on this road, folks. It's crazy. Shout out to everybody that I've seen when I've been walking up and down here. It's been a madness today, folks. And shout out, actually, I met a couple of fans at the Copy in Brecon the other day, so shout out to you two as well. It's cool often to meet the fans out and about. And then, yeah, it's cool to give folk a shout out as well, because it's interesting to get an idea of the people that watch the videos, and it's fun often if you just say hello on the passing. And I'm just loving this old dry stone dikes. The madness with this one here is it actually goes way up to pretty much the top of the hill, as far as the eye can see. This dry stone dike's leading up there. Just think what a feat of construction that is. Like, somebody must have been here for like a year building that at least, maybe more, years. The boy maybe started off as an apprentice down here and he was fully qualified by the time he got to the top. This is insane, folks. This rain's getting further and further down the glen. It's coming the same direction that I'm going, so I'm hopefully just going to stay ahead of it enough. I've nearly made it back to the car, but it looks like the day could actually be changing for the worst. We're meant to get some decent weather this next coming week, like, but just look at the colour of these dark clouds which is forming. And look how heavy the rain is at this side now, folks. Crazy scenes in the glen. Check it out, folks. All these cows here are actually staring up this direction. I think they probably don't see many people on foot, apart from maybe the farmer when he's coming to feed them. They're probably hoping that I'm bringing a bale in for them to eat, because they're all staring over this way for sure. And that was the cows that I was trying to avoid in the last episode when I went to an abandoned house, but also at the start of this episode when I first crossed the wee footbridge. I was just glad to see that the cows were at the far end of the field at that time. Now they're just slowly grazing their way down, and it's just fine Scottish grass. There'll be a fine bit of beef out of those cows one day for sure. Yeah, this rain is just continuously moving down the glen here, folks. I can now see my car, which is a bonus. So we've definitely made it. And what an adventure it's been, folks. We've seen what we think is remains of a croft, and you can see where they've been sorting out the animals, and you even see where the little house has been. It's been cool to imagine the history of that and see another wee corner of Scotland in this glen here of Glen Doll. Anyway, I'm ending this one here, folks. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll be back very soon with the next one, wherever we end up going.